Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing News.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Floyd Mayweather Jr., Canelo Alvarez. Both of these guys were the faces of boxing. You know, Canelo Alvarez is the current face. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is the former face. And, you know, when we compare these two guys, I've been getting a lot of questions asked about Floyd Mayweather and why did everybody want to fight him? Why was nobody turning down offers? But then when it comes to Canelo, guys really don't want to fight him. There's all these myths and rumors. Oh, is Canelo lowballing people? Is he really, saying he want to fight people? Did Floyd, was he feared? So look, let me just break it down and let me be honest and objective about it. And we start with Floyd Mayweather Jr. And I want to just break this down about Floyd. Floyd was an elite fighter. He was one of the most gifted and talented fighters I've ever seen in my life. Floyd Mayweather Jr. was elite and he was a truly great fighter. He had one of the best boxing IQs I've ever seen. Much respect to what Floyd can do in his skill set. But we got to be honest about the facts of the situation. And the facts are, guys like Amir Khan was calling out Floyd Mayweather Jr. for years. Absolutely zero fear of facing Floyd Mayweather. You also see guys like Keith Thurman, who's openly ducked guys like Terrence Crawford, but showed no fear to Floyd Mayweather, was open for that big, massive payday, didn't care about getting in the ring with Floyd, felt like Floyd couldn't even hurt him. And he called him out for years. You also see Manny Pacquiao called him out after he beat Keith Thurman. Manny Pacquiao shows no fear of facing Floyd in a rematch. And look, let's just keep it going. Danny Garcia too as well, basically stating I'll beat Floyd Mayweather, and this was back in 2015, 2016, and for years he stated that he could beat Floyd, felt like his skills was just good enough to beat this guy, showed no fear of stepping in the ring against Floyd. Sean Porter felt the same way. Sean Porter called him out as well. Sean Porter wanted all the smoke with Floyd Money Mayweather. You also see Errol Spence Jr. showing no fear, stating that he beat Floyd Mayweather in his prime. He is that confident that he could hurt Floyd. He's that confident that he has no fear facing a Floyd Mayweather. And this is a guy who openly avoided Terrence Crawford, saying he was going to look to take an easy road to avoid him. Let's just be real about it. So when you see that Floyd Mayweather Jr., why is Floyd Mayweather Jr., the type of guy that everybody wants to fight? Why is he the type of guy that, nobody's looking to avoid? He's not feared. It's simply because Floyd Mayweather is an elite boxer, but he presents no danger. And that's not disrespect to Floyd. That's just an absolute fact. He's not going to knock anybody out. Floyd only had 2 knockouts since 2005. 2 knockouts since 2005. And, at the end of the day, Floyd is a skillful fighter. He doesn't need to knock guys out to get victories. He doesn't need to knock guys out to get wins. But these guys figure, hey, if I fight Floyd and I lose, it's a points decision. I'm never going to get hurt, and I'm always got a puncher's chance to try to land something on the guy. That's their mindset. Maybe I'm bigger than him. Maybe I'm stronger than him. Maybe I can bully him. Maybe I can get around him, things like that. But these guys knew that going into that fight, they were never going to get hurt by a guy like Floyd Mayweather. We got to be honest about it. This guy only had 2 knockouts since 2005, so we understand what guys were looking at when they saw Floyd Mayweather. They saw a huge payday. They saw little to no punishment. They just saw potentially getting outboxed, and if they were able to land something strong, maybe they could hurt him. And so when you look at Canelo Alvarez, let's take a look at his situation. You see guys like Billy Joe Saunders openly withdrawing from consideration to face Canelo Alvarez on September 12th. And he's basically saying he didn't have time to train and all of this, but that doesn't make any sense because Canelo Alvarez has been training in the same pandemic Billy Joe Saunders has. So how do you not have the time? It doesn't make sense. But he also exposes himself, basically saying he wants Canelo Alvarez to take a pay cut. So, we got to be honest. It's all about money for Billy Joe. At the end of the day, you see Billy Joe Saunders called out Canelo Alvarez. He truly don't want to be great. And at the end of the day, he ducked him openly. You see Demetrius Andre ducked him openly. Basically comes out and asks for Canelo Alvarez to take a pay cut as well. Comes out and states that he will not fight Canelo Alvarez behind closed doors, because if you fight behind closed doors, there's no audience. With no audience, there's no live gate. With no live gate, that means he doesn't get a huge, massive payday. And so that's the end of the day. We understand that if, these guys are not looking to be great, they're not looking for legacy, they're looking for money. You see a guy like, Callum Smith come out and says Canelo never wants to fight him. Canelo's not making serious offers, but turns around that this is the same guy that turned around and asked Canelo Alvarez for $10 million, effectively pricing himself out of that fight. You see guys like Triple G, stating that he won't face Canelo Alvarez. He's going to face his mandatory. And then Keith Idec exposes Triple G, basically saying the IBF never ordered that fight. It's not overdue. Golovkin, had just recently won the belt and never really got a chance to defend it against a voluntary. But he's choosing to face his mandatory right now. So he could be facing Canelo Alvarez. He's choosing not to. He's putting that fight on the back burner. He doesn't want that fight right now, effectively ducking Canelo as well. You see Caleb Plant coming out openly stating the moment they mention his name, saying, I'm not fighting Canelo Alvarez in May. That's garbage truck juice. This guy doesn't want to be great. You see Sergey Derevyanchenko duck Canelo Alvarez twice, turned down 2 offers, and has the nerve to say something that's delusional as, I think Canelo Alvarez is an easier fight than Jamal Charlo. It just lets you know these guys truly don't want to be great. They don't want the smoke. They want the biggest paydays they can get. Now, why would you want the biggest payday you can get when guys were taking millions less to face Floyd? Guys were taking millions less to face Floyd, but they knew that if they were able to, make the fight compelling in any way and even somehow get a win, they would get millions more in a rematch. So why were they willing to take less for Floyd, but they don't want to take less for Canelo during a pandemic? It doesn't make sense. Well, let's understand. Floyd doesn't present danger simply because he only had 2 knockouts since 2005. But Canelo Alvarez, on the other hand, in his last 12 fights, he's had 6 knockouts. That's a 50% knockout ratio over his last 12 fights. This guy's an absolutely dangerous monster. Just moved up 2 weight classes and knocked out a sitting world champion in Sergey Kovalev. Made a guy, Danny Jacobs, who was 20 to 30 pounds bigger than him, back up, be defensive, and not want to engage. We got to be honest and unbiased. Canelo Alvarez is truly a transcendent fighter. He's an elite fighter. He's pound for pound #1, and literally no one wants to fight him simply because he's extremely dangerous. Guys don't want to lose to him for anything less than everything in the kitchen sink. These guys want all the money in the world to face Canelo, but for Floyd, because he presented no present danger of getting knocked out, then guys were willing to step up and take that chance because they felt they had nothing to lose other than an L on their resume. With Canelo, guys would not only take an L, but they may also get knocked out cold, brutally, viciously, and they would be a highlight reel on Twitter and YouTube. So at the end of the day, we understand why guys, are more fearful of Canelo Alvarez, and they showed absolutely no fear in Floyd Mayweather Jr. But once again, unbiased as always, it's the IBFP.